Hi girls, it's Miss Gaska. Today I'm going to go over 8th grade week 2 activity 4.6, satirical humor. Our learning targets are to analyze satire in print and non-print texts and to write an analytical paragraph that includes appropriate and varied transitions. So you're going to be viewing a film clip that I show you and take notes on the satire you observe. So I'm going to be playing that clip by putting it onto Canvas for you. Sorry, I forgot the name. And you're going to be watching that video and then writing what the topic is about from the clip, what the clip is from, so the name of the clip, and then what type of satire is being used. Are they using irony? Are they using sarcasm? Are they using ridicule? So on and so forth. So then, in this we're going to go on to the next part, which is an article. So to preview it, in this activity, we're going to be reading a satirical article and thinking about how the author uses satire to express disapproval on a particular topic. So, our setting a purpose for reading section, which I always say is our most important part, we're going to be underlining words and phrases that make us laugh or that we recognize as humor. We're also going to be circling unknown words and phrases, trying to determine the meaning of them by using context clues, word parts, or a dictionary. And we're also going to place an asterisk by any words or phrases that indicate irony, sarcasm, or ridicule. So let me go over those 3 words really quick. So irony is basically when something happens that's the opposite of what you expect. But there are different types of irony. There's verbal irony, which is another way of saying sarcasm, when somebody says something that's the opposite of what they mean. There's situational irony when an event happens where it is the opposite of what was supposed to happen or what somebody would have expected to happen. There's dramatic irony. There's different kinds of irony, but overall it's just something that occurs that is the opposite of what was expected. Sarcasm is a way of saying verbal irony, which is when somebody says the opposite of what they really mean. So for instance, if your nails are looking a little bit on the raggedy side and somebody says, nice nails, they're probably being sarcastic. So then ridicule is openly making fun of something. Or making it seem ridiculous. So, underfunded schools forced to cut past tense from language programs. So, this is from The Onion, which is known for writing satire. Already, we have some satire going on with the title, forced to cut past tense from language programs, meaning you're not going to be able to learn about that particular tense when you're learning about the different tenses, which doesn't make sense because why couldn't you fit it in? It's not that hard to understand. So I'm going to already place an asterisk by this title because to me that's an example of sarcasm, or not sarcasm, an example of irony. So I'm going to read the first couple paragraphs with you and show you how I would annotate it, and then it's up to you to read the rest of the article and annotate the rest. So remember that we're looking for these things in order to complete our annotations. Underlining words or phrases that make us laugh, circle unknown words or phrases, and then asterisk by things that are ironic, sarcastic, or ridiculous. So faced with ongoing budget crises, underfunded schools nationwide are increasingly left with no option but to cut the past tense, a grammatical construction traditionally used to relate all actions and states that have transpired at an earlier point of time from their standard English language and language arts programs. So it's just like a recap, a statement of what the article is going to be about, and it's basically the same thing as what's being said in the title. So I'm going to say that that phrase is an example of ridicule or of satire. So also I'm going to circle words that I think might be unfamiliar to you. You might not know transpired. But other than that, I think that most of the words are pretty familiar to you. I think that the author is trying to be funny when they say cutting the past tense, like removing the past tense from the material. And then this is the rest of the sentence, so I'm going to continue to underline it here. So now, a part of American school curricula for more than 200 years, the past tense was deemed by school administrators to be too expensive to keep in primary and secondary education. So I think that's an example of the author trying to be funny. And then also making something ridiculous, so I'm going to put an asterisk. So we're going to, actually I'm going to read this third one with you, just to make sure you're understanding what's going on, and then you can read the rest. This was by no means an easy decision, but teaching our students how to conjugate verbs in a way that would allow them to describe events that have already occurred is a luxury that we can no longer afford, Phoenix Area High School Principal Sam Pinnock said. So I'm going to underline the part where he says luxury, because it's kind of funny that, you know, learning about grammar would be considered a luxury that we would have to be able to afford. And I also think that we're having what's called, I think that that's an example of irony, so I'm going to put an asterisk on the end of that too. So this is an example of dialogue used in order to create an effective humor. So I'm going to go ahead to the bottom of the paper where the questions are. Once you're done with the annotating of this piece, feel free to meet me, or please meet me there, and I will help you with those questions. So for number 2, it says, what role does the first paragraph play in the structure of this article? So what does that first paragraph do when it's setting up the rest of the article? Why is that first paragraph there? So that will help you kind of figure out what the answer is. Number 3 says, how do quotes from specific people throughout the article add to the development of ideas? So how do those quotes add to the development of ideas? Do they give more information? Do they give examples? Like what is it exactly that they're adding? For number 4, it says, how does the use of present tense in the last quote in paragraph 13 emphasize the satire? So go to paragraph 13 and look for how the last quote uses present tense instead of past tense, and explain how that emphasizes this humor, the satire of this piece. For number 6, it asks you to work collaboratively, but we're going to work independently to diffuse and paraphrase the definition of satire. So satire, a form of high comedy, is the use of irony, sarcasm, and or ridicule in exposing, denouncing, and or deriding human vice and folly. So you're trying to write that in your own words. You may need to look up some of these words in order to figure out what they mean before you could write it in your own words. Basically reduce it to something that somebody your age could understand. Then, it wants us to reread the text and place an exclamation point by the highly connotative diction that stands out to you. Note the effect of these words in the My Notes space. So, connotative. That means it's when it gives you a particular association or feeling to go along with the word. So words that have a definite meaning besides their regular definition meaning. Now circle and explain your response to this text. I think this text is, do you think it's hilarious? Do you think it's funny? Do you think it's clever? Do you think it's ridiculous? And then because, and then say why. Discuss parts of the text that made you laugh, and describe how the connotative words help create the humor. So you're explaining how those words that give a particular feeling or association help create the humor of that text. So now we're going to use this graphic organizer to explore the satire. So you're going to explain what the problem is that's being exposed here. So they're not talking about the problem of past tense. That's the joke they're making. They're talking about a different problem that caused them to eliminate the past tense. So that's the problem you're going to be looking for the vice or folly exposed. Then for textual evidence, find one example of irony, one example of sarcasm, and one example of ridicule in order to complete this chart. Then you're going to be writing an analytical paragraph. So you're going to be using a well-chosen transition word or phrase that can help show the relationship between the ideas of your writing. And here's a list of some transitional words and phrases. I want you to look at this list very carefully and choose a couple of favorites from each category so that you can have them in your repertoire when you're writing your essays. It's very important to go through and figure out which ones you like to use, which ones you cycle back to, but you don't want to use the same ones every time. So you want to have like 2 or 3 in each group that you could just pull out and use whenever you're writing and need a transition. So, which instances of satire in the article do you think went the furthest to make the author's point, and why? Instead of discussing with the partner, I want you to jot down your answer in this notes section over here. Then last but not least, writing to sources explanatory text says, analyze how the text about underfunded schools uses satirical humor to expose human vice or folly. So make sure that you establish and support a controlling idea, use transitions to create cohesion and clarify the relationships among ideas and concepts, use precise diction and maintain a formal style, support your analysis with evidence from the text. So make sure that when you're writing this paragraph, you're focusing on the issue and that you're hitting each of these bullet points. And then that's all for that lesson. I'll see you in the next lesson, Activity 4.7. Thanks for watching, and if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. Take care.